Hello, my name is Konstantin. In this series of short lessons, we talk about JSight API language. You've heard from me that the basis for the JSight schema is an example of valid data. But what does it mean exactly? Today, I will tell you. Let's consider the simplest JSight schema you can imagine. It consists only of one symbol, digit 1. Look at the line 4. Here it is. Type simple schema and its schema 1. What does it mean? As I said before, the basis for the JSight schema is always an example of valid data. So it means that if you want to match the schema, you can transmit data over some integer value. For example, you can transmit 1 or 2 or 0 or -10, etc. So it's quite simple and quite understandable. But I want you to know some more for your deeper understanding. Do you remember I've told you about such called rules, which you should write inside of annotations in small JSON objects, and these rules provide additional requirements for the corresponding element. And one of the most important rule is the rule type. It specifies the type of the corresponding element. And the point is, if you do not explicitly specify the rule type, then it's implicitly specified by the element of the example. In our case, we haven't implicitly specified the rule type for this element, so this rule type is implicitly specified as an integer for this element. On the line 7, you see the absolutely equivalent schema, but in this schema, the rule type is specified explicitly. If you don't believe me, you can look at the rendered documentation and switch to the table view here, and you see that these two schemas are absolutely equivalent. The integer in the root, the integer in the root. And absolutely the same thing happens with other implicit types. Look at the next example. On the line 27, you see an implicitly specified integer type. On line 28, the float type. On line 29, null type. On line 30, implicitly specified object type, then boolean type, then array type, and then string type. And of course, you can specify these types explicitly. We see it on the next example. All the mentioned types are specified explicitly here, and we have absolutely the same schema. So you see, it's very easy to understand. And I want to make a couple of notes about arrays and objects, because you know, objects and arrays are a bit more complicated than scalar types. Let's look at the next example. In the next example, we have an object with two keys, key 1 and key 2. In the comments below, I provided you with an example of valid data, key 1 foo, key 2 bar. And I want to draw your attention to a couple of notes here. First, by default, the properties of an object are required. What does it mean? If you want your data match the schema, you cannot omit any of these keys. On line from 17 to 17.2, I provided you an example of invalid data because somebody have forgotten the key 2 here. And the second notion is that by default, you cannot add additional properties to objects. For example, the data on lines from 74 to 78 are invalid because you have provided the key 3 here and it doesn't match the schema. Of course, you can change this default behavior by using the rule optional and the rule additional properties, and I'll tell you about these rules in next videos. And one notion about arrays. Look at this example. We have a simple array of strings here. And what I want to say is that by default, the size of an array is not limited. What it means? It means that it can have 1 element, 2 elements, trillion elements, and which is not so obvious, 0 elements. So don't forget that a valid array can have 0 elements and be empty. Of course, you can change this behavior using the rule min items. I will tell you about this rule in next video. That's all for today. Remember that the basis of the schema is an example of valid data, and that each element of this example implicitly sets the rule type for this element, unless of course you have specified this type explicitly. Also remember that properties of objects are required by default, that additional properties are prohibited by default, and remember that by default array can have any size, including 0, an empty array. If you want to read more on this topic, please go to the JSight Schema specification and find the section Example. Here you will find the very detailed information. I share this code. You'll find the link to the documentation and the link to this code below this video. If you like JSight API language, please like this video, go to our GitHub page and give us a star. It motivates us a lot. The link to the GitHub you'll find below the video. Thank you. Bye.